So maybe can you evolve a bit more on your background through college, through football, and how you managed to stumble into this kind of I hesitate to say movement culture because I don't know if you class yourself as involved in movement culture. Maybe we can go there afterwards. But
Yeah,
let's
it
say this
was.
kind of body weight strength practice and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, just start.
rock and roll, man.
Yeah, so I started through athletics growing up. Played a bit of everything, but then took soccer a bit more seriously. And when I realized I was going to be playing in college, that's when I got really interested in strength and conditioning, more on the performance side of training.
Yeah,
And when I was trying, because I was never really naturally gifted with athleticism, and
yeah,
I always got by in sports just through my skill. But to play at a higher level, you had to be more athletic, you had to be bigger, stronger, faster. And that stuff didn't come easy for me, so I needed to train for everything I've ever built. Um, so strength and conditioning was that avenue. And then as I was getting more invested in it and like looking up to, Olympic weightlifters, like I really got into Olympic weightlifting um, because we learned it from a young age in high school,
yeah.
just with like our weights program at my high school. And just seeing how people would drop into a squat so effortless. And I could never sit in a squat for as long as I can remember. I don't have a single baby picture of me squatting deep, you know?
No,
Maybe my
really?
head maybe my head wasn't big enough to counterbalance me. I don't know what it was, but there's no evidence
That's
out
funny.
there of me ever squatting. My flexibility was always just terrible. And I always
The
felt
most
like it
inflexible
was,
baby.
yeah, who would have
That's funny.
thought? That's
Yeah.
why I hate when I hear people say like if you see an Instagram video on developing a squat and be like, restore your ability to squat. Be like, hey,
There's
what
no
am I
evidence here.
restoring? What am I restoring? I need to build this from scratch. So
Damn, son.
it was always almost like the aesthetic uh, of watching an Olympic lifter like catch a clean and jerk or clean or a snatch and just burying themselves in the bottom position and like getting out of it. It was almost like a form of aesthetics for me, like the flexibility side of things, because it was just ugly watching me just try
Yeah.
to muscle everything. That's kind of another funny tangent is when people think training for aesthetics is worthless or a shallow goal, but we're all doing it in some sense, whether it's for a greater good, like there's an aesthetic part of it that we're after. Like, yes, training my
100%.
flexibility might help my joints feel a little bit better or something, but if you keep asking why, maybe there's an aesthetic, like a perfect line handstand or something like that. There's an aesthetic to it.
Mm. I've got
Okay.
this rhetorical loop that I sometimes speak to some students about, and we call it the kind of the irrelevance of why, or the insolvable nature of why. So like you can always ask why to the resolution of why. So if you ask
Yeah.
like a 5-year-old child, or if a 5-year-old child asks you, I should say, who are we going to see? You can say, oh, I'm going to see them. Or if they say, where are we going to go? You can say, are we going there? What are we going to do? We're going to do this. But if they say, why are we going to do it? Oh, because X. And then they go, oh, but yeah, but why? Oh, why? Z. And it's like a never ending loop of like, why? So I use why to like an inspirational level, let's say. I
Mm.
love the feeling of like being inspired, but I also think that how maybe holds a more strong basis to a practice. It kind of gives a bit more of a depth and a less emotional standing.
Mm.
If it's only the Simon Sinek why, some days I'm like, I feel different. Some years I'm like, my opinions changed or my perspectives changed or life changed. Whereas I think a bit more focus on how it's a bit less dogmatic maybe or a bit less um what's the word? Volatile.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So how meaning like
how you feel and how you move, I think, or how you move makes you feel, I think is a
yeah,
real nice
okay.
way. And I think
That's
that
better.
maybe makes sense. Maybe. Let's dig into this a bit. You have no evidence of in your prior self of being mobile. So obviously there's some level of how you move now affecting you positively.
Yeah, I'd say so.
For me, this feels a bit like it's allowing you to be grounded in like a meaningful practice for you. Like how you're feeling, how you're moving feels a lot better than, oh, my why is this, or my why is this. It's a bit more cognitive, a bit less cognitive, I should say.
Yeah, it's almost like asking the why later after you've been through all the stuff you've been through based on the how.
Yes. To go full circle.
Yeah,
Let's go back.
exactly.
I feel like so Olympic lifting is a bit of a rogue one for me because essentially what I can gather, you were essentially immobile
Yeah,
and you go to maybe the most dynamic use of mobility in like standardized sport.
right.
How was that for you?
Well, I guess there was a social component too, because like everyone in my team sports were, we were all doing the same lifting, the same lifting program. So Olympic lifting was big. We had a good coach back when I was first learning the Olympic lifts, and just watching some of my other teammates and stuff squat deep and just demonstrate regular people level of mobility. And the fact that I couldn't do any of that, I couldn't touch halfway down my shins, I couldn't sit in a squat. It was almost like, yeah, I was like, I kind of feel left out, or I just feel like I suck at this. And just being competitive, it's like, oh, I suck at this. I need to get better at it. So I think this whole thing just led me down a path of like really researching mobility. And I guess fast forward to, you know, college where performance was more of a factor. I'm still like very interested in mobilizing and got really into the Kelly Starrett stuff. And this is around the time where I started noticing like my hips were feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I was developing like hip impingement. And this is also around the same time I was developing an interest for physiotherapy. Because the whole time I thought I was going to be doing like strength and conditioning. I was interning with other colleges, getting a lot of experience in the strength and conditioning side of things. And I remember I had a coach tell me, he was like, this industry is all about who you know, and there's long hours, little pay. He's like, you seem to have more of a mindset for the rehab sides of things. So I took his advice and just went down that route. And then, but yeah, so when it came to mobility, I think I stumbled across like Ido Portal's squat protocols, and it wasn't even like the squat clinic stuff that got me interested. It was like seeing him move. Like that's how I found him, and then just seeing the guy like, yeah, just move his body in space. I'm like, this guy looks like he doesn't have a lot of pain, or whether it was pain or not, it was just like whether I fixed my issues or not. Like I feel like if I was able to move like that, I'd be better off. So instead of always trying to find of like a why am I in pain, or how am I going to fix my hip issues, I kind of switched the narrative to like, let's see what I can achieve, and let's see how I can just develop the full potential of how to move through my own body. And let's see where that gets me, whether I have the same pain or not. If I'm able to sit in a deep squat, do pistol squats, Cossack squats, let's see if I feel better just along that journey.
Yeah. When was the first time you felt your GPP, your kind of physicality limiting your performance?
Honestly, not on the field when it came to like sports, outside of just like speed and like conditioning, but not mobility side of things. This is another conversation on like the transfer of like just building more and more range. Like, does it really transfer? But it was more so in the weight room. So I just in exercises that required deeper levels of mobility, that's where I felt it actually limiting me. And of course, like my hips never felt great. Like after playing 120 minutes of intense soccer, I think my whole body was just achy. But that's just more the
Yeah.
nature of sport, not just, you know, your general capacity.
And so you then went more into Olympic lifting post football, having found this kind of limitation. Is that what drove you into the Olympic lifting?
Yeah, exactly. I think I just developed a love for it throughout my years of preparation for athletics. And then after, you know how it is when you're a competitive athlete, like it's very tough for you to put on muscle. Like you have an off season that's like 3 months, and then you get into season, you lose a bunch of weight because you're not training as hard. So it was just kind of like a cycle of that. And then once I'm done with college, I graduated. It's like, all right, I'm gonna go hard on Olympic lifting and powerlifting and put on some mass. And like then it was around the same time where I'm applying to physical therapy schools. And I remember I did this cycle, uh, this year-long cycle of like a Olympic lifting hybrid power building program. And I developed this shoulder pain, this AC joint pain that
Oh no.
it honestly lasted a full year. And I was admitted into a physical therapy school program, and I was just having these like internal monologues in my head, like I'm about to become a physical therapist that's in more pain than probably the majority of people he's going to be seeing. Like it would be radiating. It got to the point where I couldn't
Yeah.
bench press anymore. I couldn't do anything in the front rack. It was just very sharp pain. So it was around this time where I was also interested in CrossFit and stuff like that. I was doing CrossFit on the side, and gymnastics was always like the biggest limiting thing for me in CrossFit. It was like the ring, the muscle ups, the handstands, all of that stuff, and of course the Olympic lifting, the flexibility side of things. So I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I think I'm at the point where I need to put this on the side. The goal was always to get back to Olympic lifting, but I kind of just went down this rabbit hole and never looked back. So yeah, I found Ito. I got into like FRC and a bunch of like other mobility systems and really dove in. I took away the Olympic lifts. I took away a lot of the power lifts. Um, I finally got coaching, from people,
Mm.
and it
What did
was
that
it
look
was
like? Who was the first coaching practice that you were working with, and what kind of stuff were you doing then?
it was a local guy here who trained with Ito
Okay.
in person. He doesn't do anything movement culture related anymore. I think he's actually into bodybuilding now, but he was kind of giving me like, you know how the Ito Portal coaching was back then. It's like you get a program from Ito, and then now you're selling that program.
It's on the email chain.
Exactly, exactly. So it was like the same stuff. So I did some phases with him. This is around the same time I became buddies with DJ Strong Camps. He was interested in the movement culture side of things too, so we were doing things together. Um, and then he was also big in the FRC world. And then, yeah, just taking those courses, meeting people through that. Um, yeah, it's all a bit of a blur, honestly, in terms of who was coaching me. But those were the predominant programming styles I was doing, and it was a lot of like going all in. The Ito stuff came later. I think what I did first was just FRC stuff. Like I fell into the narrative of you need to take away everything else, and like this has to be the training if you want to improve your mobility. So I was doing my, hour and a half sessions of like just cars, just hip rotation,
Oh wow. Okay.
just dorsiflexion, and like I was doing like a little bit of strength training, but it was all just like slow, like robotic eccentrics and stuff like that.
Wow.
I was able to maintain some strength and muscle, but you know what I did that stuff for probably like a year and a half, and I really didn't get that much more mobile. Probably not much if I'm being
Wow.
honest.
So you
And
suffered for a year and a half through monotonous training.
yeah, and I just got weaker. So
Wow.
that's the thing with like systems like that. It's like the application just isn't there. And like once you finally learn from people who have developed flexibility uh, as a stiff, naturally stiff adult, but then also have trained other things, you begin to put the pieces together more. And I think that's a way better learning experience than taking all these courses and learning all these
Definitely.
different
Yeah.
systems. I think
Because I
understanding
think,
proper, yeah,
go
like
ahead.
understanding proper programming, it comes first. And then you can kind of put the principles and all the systematic bits into place once you understand the foundation of things.
Yeah. I think it's really important to resonate with people you're teaching or coaching as well. Like them feeling like you're sharing from experience rather than sharing from a book, I think is really valuable.
Hmm.
Like
Exactly.
having that interpersonal connection or like resonance of, yeah, man, I really understand your sufferance right now.
Yes, because we know the body doesn't work and adapt like a textbook tells us to. There's so many different external factors that come into play.
Yeah.
But honestly, when I first started noticing mobility changes finally was when I got into the Ido Portal stuff. So it was like 2017, I went to my first workshop with him and got to train with this was in Boulder, the Boulder Movement School, Movement Collective it was called at the time. They're called
Hmm.
something else, APECO now. Uh, so they were hosting him and got to train with them in class. I was learning more about like loaded progressive stretching, like Ito's way of doing things. And it's like, oh, this actually makes more sense, treating it like uh, just making it
Strength
as
training.
efficient. Yeah, like, well, I mean, FRC had the strength training approach too, but it was like,
Hmm.
it was so many unnecessary little pieces built in. Whereas like Ito's approach was more of like the use it, like here, do the thing. You want a pancake? Load the pancake. Do reps.
Mm.
And I do think there is a bit of a balance between the two. Like you have to isolate to assist with some of the integration stuff. But that's when I actually started like, okay, like this makes more sense to me. And then learning from people like Emmett Lewis and like Kit Laughlin, some of those people
Mm.
who were taking that stuff but putting their own little spin on it based on their experience. I always liked them because they were more experiential. Kit Laughlin had a blog at the time
Mm.
where it was just a bunch of people on there talking about their training and what's working for them, what's not working for them, protocols they're trying out. And I was always on that blog. I was interacting on it. I think that was the golden days of movement culture, the blogs, the forums
100%.
actually, not the blogs, the
Yeah.
forums.
The free use of information or the free kind of movement of information, I think was so valuable. It was also around the time I think where Instagram was like chronological. So if
Yeah.
somebody posted at like 4 p.m. or 6 p.m., everyone else that was on at that time would also be seeing that stuff, commenting, asking questions, talking about, whatever. That was always such a great time. Um, I want to try and frame this in a way that's understandable as possible for people listening, because I feel like me and you can talk about this stuff and blast past things a bit quickly.
True.
So FRC, functional range conditioning, let's maybe try and define from your perspective what they're trying to do with their system, and then compare that with the loaded progressive stretching of what you experience with Edo. Because I'd
Mm.
love to hear from your perspective the similarities and the differences and how your perspectives evolved through those two practices and then onwards.
Yeah, it seems like the FRC, their main objective is like getting every individual piece working in a way it should. And like I don't know how you really define how a joint is supposed to move. Like yes, we have these textbook standards of what the average range of motion a joint can demonstrate through rotation, flexion, extension, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, okay, if your joint doesn't rotate this much, then that means it's not going to be able to demonstrate that. But I do think that's a bit of a faulty understanding of anatomy because every movement is a rotation around a joint axis. So we can't just say, oh, because you don't have this amount of motion in the transverse plane, it's going to limit sagittal plane motion, whatever. Like if you can't rotate, that doesn't mean you'll be able to not flex. So, and then you have like the more Ito style things where it's like more compound movements of stretching. Like you want a middle split, you do the middle split and you load it up. You want a front split, you hold the front split, you perform it isometrically. Both forms of the system are building strength through your ranges or attempting to. I would say FRC focuses more on like the internal tension where you're trying to generate that tension
Mm.
from your own system isometrically, whereas, you know, more of the Christopher Summers gymnastic bodies, Ido Portal, loaded stretching, that's like, okay, we actually leverage our body weight or use some external load to provide that external form of resistance and tension to not have to
Do you have a
fake.
preference of either way? I feel like when I was exploring FRC way back, it was called irradiation, maybe, if I remember
Yeah,
rightly. This kind of
yeah.
internal driving force, or this internal intensity, maybe we could call it, versus like this external blocking or loading. Do you have like a leaning?
Yeah, the external
Why?
because you don't have to fake it. Like I think the issue with the internal form of loading is it just looks hard. Like the irradiation, it's very like neurologically taxing. Like you're just because I'm doing this, just squeezing my muscles as hard as I can doesn't mean I'm
Yeah.
actually producing a bunch of mechanical tension. Whereas if I am manipulating my body lever, my manipulating my torso or my arms overhead or holding weight distally, I can generate this tension because I have to, or else I'm going to be squashed by the weight,
Mm.
or just enough tension to allow me to get deeper into a position. Because if I generate too much tension, I'm going to just overcome and I'm not going to be able to yield into the deeper position. So I think using that external form of feedback, it's a way of not having to fake the tension, and you have to use as much or as little as needed to achieve the desired task. Whereas we might
Yeah.
need like this external force to help assist us into a deeper position. Whereas if I was just doing something very isolated and just going to a range where I feel comfortable and then just crushing down into the ground, say with my foot or my hand, is that really creating the adaptation we're after? Like, is it an actual, uh, is it actually driving that mechanical tension needed to whatever, increase neurologic adaptations or whether it's biological, increasing sarcomeres at in series? Like, who knows? I don't think so. Like, I think it's just making it look hard.
Mm. I want to ask, when it comes to mobility, what are the similarities and differences to strength training?
Um, I think the whole adaptation process is different.
You
So
do, okay.
I think the whole strength training is mobility, mobility is strength training. I think people can get lost in that and they're just going to take stretches and load it up. And this is what I was doing for a while. And for somebody who's very naturally more bound for force production and strength and explosivity, um, it's very easy to just load up your end range and move through it or resist it. And you know what? I worked with a lot of Olympic lifters. I work out of a CrossFit gym now, and I've noticed this on like they're actually very strong in their end ranges. Like they're they could do RDLs, good mornings. They could squat deep, but like if you ask them to pause there with very little weight, even their body weight, they freak out. So I think the adaptation with flexibility is a bit different to where you have a stretch tolerance side of things. There's neurological
Mm.
adaptations too. It's not just about, and of course, strength is neurological as well, but it's just not about how strong are you at an end range. It's can you tolerate a stretched position and allow that weight to win? And I think if you look at the strength coach, who's also the mobility coach, they're like, yeah, it's all about just getting strong in your end ranges. But I think using strength-based exercises to get you flexible is different than just getting strong at your end range, because the goal of getting flexible in an exercise is pushing past your current set point of range, right?
Mm.
So if I was to take an RDL, a Romanian deadlift for hamstring flexibility, and I'm just going through my full range of motion and going as heavy as I can through my full range of motion, that's a strength exercise through your full range of motion. Okay, that's great for whatever, fortifying connective tissue, getting strong through full range. That's a great way to maintain your flexibility. But if you want to actually develop more hamstring flexibility, the intention of that exercise should be developing more range. So maybe you're using a light enough weight that you can actually pause there, breathe, think about pulling yourself deeper and deeper and deeper, and then come out of it. That's one rep. So
Yeah.
it's a different form of hard. And yes, there's going to be progressive overload. There's going to be different measures of intensity and percentages, like stuff that's very similar to strength training. But I think the adaptation itself and the intention that you're putting into the
Mm.
exercise is different. And of
Yeah, I
course,
like that.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. The intention, I think, is really key. I've spoken a
Mhm.
bit before about this idea of kind of intensity versus perception. And you can probably, an RDL is a great example. If you're loading your 1RM and trying to clarify intention, pull yourself deeper, etc., your perception of that is going to be much lacking because of the intensity of the exercise, as opposed to loading like 50% or 30% of that load and using the load to do the same job, but with much better awareness or perception of your intention, if that makes sense.
Exactly. No, I would agree with that. And also like the progressive overload's different with strength training too, whereas it's about increasing weight over time, whereas flexibility,
Mm.
it's like, can we decrease this amount of external resistance so we can get
Mm.
there ourselves over time?
Progressive underload.
Exactly. I think I've heard you use that term before, and I like it.
Yeah, actually, I should quote Matt Smith for that one. I got that from him.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, it's a great term. I think it's really useful.
So I think we could
It's
draw a lot
also
of parallels.
definitely. I think this is why I asked the question because it's quite a difficult one and it's quite a nuanced conversation. It can be both. I feel like I can stand on both sides of the equation depending on who I'm talking to.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's good to be on the side of it's very similar or the same as strength training at a certain level. And on other times, I want to stand on the complete other side of the fence and be like, no, 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 it's very different. It shouldn't be treated the same.
Hmm.
I want to pull more from you on this topic because I think it's quite valuable. Other than the overload underload idea, what else do you see as differentiated between these two practices?
Um, hmm. So I think when it comes to somebody who's very stiff, first they're going to need to use the weight to their advantage to help get them into a position. And this is where I mentioned yielding versus overcoming. Whereas I think strength
Can you
training,
define the
it's
two for the listeners?
yeah. So I think with strength training, it's about like uh, overcoming the force. So like a back squat, you don't want to get buried at the bottom. You want to spring back up from the hole. Whereas flexibility, it's almost like you want to allow the weight to win. So you want to find a weight that's heavy enough that it, you can create some resistance. Your muscles are working at end range, but the you're still allowing that weight to kind of win and push you a little bit deeper. And of course, there's different intentions we could do with stretching. If we're doing purely isometric stretching, maybe it's very similar to strength training, and we're just trying to stay in a range where we can resist that motion. And maybe this is somebody who's very guarded in their muscles at end range, and we're just maybe not even trying to build flexibility. We're just trying to build strength in that end range. But then maybe there's that person like I talked about who is very strong in their end range, this was me when I first came up. I was able to hold my current range of a middle split with like a 20 kg plate and not go any deeper. Like my end range was the same compared to if I took that weight plate away. I would get a
Mm.
little bit deeper with the weight plate, but I was able to hold that for a long period of time. So is strength in my end range, is that really what's holding me back? Or was it just like my tissue's ability to like yield and allow
Mm.
for that for the weight to win? So I think
What is going on there? Is that like a stretch tolerance? Is that like a tension of the tissue, or what exactly do you feel is going on there, or was going on there with you, I should say?
you know what? I find that to be the case in some people who have a strength background. And I think what it really boils down to is just competing stimulus. I think people like that have to dial it down on the stuff that they have a natural affinity for. So I remember at the time I never wanted to give up my my performance-based things. After being almost traumatized by giving it all up with FRC, I got back into it. It's like, no, I should be able to squat. I should be able to lunge heavy and still integrate my flexibility work. And
Mm.
I kind of just fell back into the same patterns of like my legs blew up again, like I got jacked legs, but like that stuff is always the stuff that it comes easy, and that's what my
Mm.
body's going to adapt to quickly, and like the other stuff I'm training is going to be drowned out. So
Yeah.
I think yes, I built the tolerance in stretched positions because I was working on them. That's one of those things where it's like it gets better no matter it's just a matter of you working on it. But to actually get more flexible, I think I had to take away the side of me that was all about explosivity and force production just to allow those adaptations to actually shine through. So I think when I actually prioritize the flexibility work, that's when I think gains were coming a lot faster. And that's also where the gymnastics strength stuff and the handstands helped because it gave me something to do outside of like sprints and heavy bench press. It was a great way to express or um, it was a great way to like say, okay, I need this range of motion for the activities that I
Mm.
want to do. So
Yeah.
it gave
Yeah.
me more incentive to take away some of that stuff that was maybe hindering my flexibility at first.
100%. I really like the idea of having like how do you say it? Like placeholders to give meaning to goals.
Yes.
Um, whether it's a sport or like a specific contextualization of like a competition or, for example, like a high level skill that feels really far away. It gives so much more meaning to something as simple as like a pancake, which
Mm.
can be a bit whimsical. That's kind of where the why kind of question comes in. It's like, why am I doing this again? If you can have that end purpose, maybe it's more valuable. For me, it's a lot of the time climbing, a lot
Yeah.
of or arm wrestling, as I was saying off air. A lot of the boring stuff I can endure because I have that end purpose or that end meaning that keeps me kind of coming back to the boring stuff. And it's like, yep, I know that by doing this, the thing that I really enjoy, that gives me joy, is going to be better for it. I think that's really
Yes.
important. You just said, however, that essentially you dropped the things that you were really enjoying and motivated for, so the strength work, the high intensity athletics, in order to dive into an area that you were essentially not talented with or at.
Hmm.
How was that emotional shift for you, and what was that process like from going hyper athletic towards less athletic, at least to begin with?
Uh, for me, it was always being afraid to let something go because I thought I would lose it altogether. And that was what was holding me back. Because if you asked me, like, what do I really want? It was to improve my flexibility, to develop the ability to sit in a deep squat whenever I want, be able to do Cossack squats, be able to pistol squat, like just have that complexity in my lower body on command, and not just only be able to, squat with my 1.25-inch heel lifted shoes after an hour warm up. Like that's what I really
Yeah.
wanted, but I was afraid to give up the strength stuff just because I thought I needed it. A lot of the people I was looking up to in the past was like, oh, strength is everything, you have to be strong. And of course, like we can ask, what does strength even actually mean? But it was honestly like just from a health perspective, like, oh, if I give this up, am I going to get fat or am I going to get out of shape because I'm just training flexibility and gymnastic stuff? Am I going to lose my muscle? I think these were the things mentally holding me back, is losing progress in things that I worked so hard to build because the stuff never came natural for me. Like I know I say my body is more affinitive for strength, but it's still, I was skinny fat growing up. Like I still never developed it easy. So it was more of, okay, I have to just go all in. And once I got a coach that like told me, oh, hey, it's okay to let go of this. Like you're not going to get worse. It was like so freeing to have somebody else tell me it's okay to do that, Whereas if it was
What do you
up to
mean by
me,
get worse? Do you mean like get worse at the specific thing or be like a worse person? What do you mean by get worse?
I shouldn't say get worse like at back squatting or stuff like that. It was more so like, hey, you might get a little bit worse at this, or not. I shouldn't say worse. You might decrease your performance in this certain aspect of training, but it's okay. Like, you could get it back. What you were able to build, it's going to take a long time to build, but you'll be able to get it back much faster if you want to get it back. So might as well put in the majority of your resources into the thing that is holding you back right now, which is your flexibility. Because we only have, the enough recovery resources for a certain amount of things. And if you're doing too many things, like your body doesn't know what to, shuttle those resources to. Your nervous system doesn't know what to adapt to when you're sending too many competing signals. So I was like the
You have a,
original hybrid athlete. Hybrid athlete's like the big thing right now.
I didn't
I,
want to say it.
I was the one trying to do everything, and like I was doing everything not very well. So I think there is a big I think specializing in something has a lot of value, not only
Yeah,
physically and your ability to adapt at that one thing, but mentally too, like being okay with letting go of something that isn't quite serving
100%.
you at this time, and knowing
Love that.
you could get it back if you need it.
I also think having like a modular practice or a seasonal practice is very valuable. Whether it's through seasons of the year or like modules of your life, I really find I do way better, as you say, like physically and mentally. Having specific focus at specific times of the year, specific times of my life, whether I'm like the last year or so, I've been quite busy, been traveling around a bit more. So my life's been a little bit more volatile and the routine I so long for hasn't quite been there. So I realized I had to dial down the chaos of all the things I was training in order to just keep my practice kind of rooted into what I needed for my life right now. I think that's a really good point.
I think that's extremely important, but it doesn't always have to be like seasonal in a means of like, okay, this season I'm going to be in the gym doing weighted pulling or whatever. And then this season, it's summertime. I'm going to get outdoors, just do climbing. I'm going to forget the gym stuff, which from what it sounds like, that's how you go about it. Yeah. Like
Definitely.
yeah. So I think that's
Definitely.
great, but it also doesn't have to be like that. But I do think it's important that you have seasons of like intentions in your training. So like maybe I have, if we use flexibility again as an example, it could be for you, it's okay, I'm gonna spend 3 to 6 months really trying to develop this isolated flexibility. And then maybe I'm gonna spend the other 6 months using it, maybe doing acrobatics or,
Yeah.
just expressing it in my climbing. It could be that, or it could be like, okay, I'm going to take 3 months to use external weight to push me into deeper ranges. And then maybe the next 3 months, I'm going to just focus on working on the active side of flexibility and working on the only using enough weight that I could really feel the closing angle
Yeah.
muscles, the opposite muscles working hard. Or maybe it's like hypertrophy blocks and intensity blocks in your strength training. So maybe it's you're not overloading like one specific system all year
Yeah.
around.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's valuable. Um, you said something earlier. You said, what even is strength?
Mm.
Do you have a personal definition?
No, I think strength is a skill, you know?
Okay.
Uh, I think raw capacity has transfer to skill, but at the same time, if you want to get better at something and demonstrate increased capacity there, you have to do that thing. So
Hmm.
I was always very interested in, the transfer of capacity to skill. Like, okay, how can we do as little as possible of the main skill to have transfer there, just so I can work on a broad area
Yeah.
of different practices in one kind of training plan. Um, I think that's very valuable to start with, or maybe to do as a more sustainable approach. But you just have to realize you're probably not going to make gains in whatever you want to make gains at as efficiently as being very specific to that main goal. So an example is the Stalder press. So for the longest time, I didn't, well, I tried being as specific as possible, and it was getting me nowhere because I don't think I had the capacity for it. I was just trying to drill the pattern, but I was just kind of reaching these roadblocks because I was very, I was just weak in my push and I was inflexible. So then I went through this period
Two bad
of,
things to be for the shoulder press.
exactly. So then honestly, like I went through this period of just training planche, and that got me the Stalder press. Of course, while training my flexibility and my hamstring flexibility, adductor flexibility. So could I then say, oh, we don't need to train the Stalder press. We could get it for free. But no, I just had better, I did have to do specific work for it, but I was able to apply the capacity I've built better to a skill that required it. So I think this is where strength is, it is specific. Like I met the capacity demands of the specific joint angles for the Stalder press. I had the flexibility required, but it was just about putting it together. And I don't think if I just trained planche, I would be able to just do a Stalder press. Maybe some people can, but it requires the coordination, the balance, the motor unit recruitment at the right time. I think this is strength right there. It's a coordinative ability as
Right.
opposed to just raw capacity.
Capacity. I got you. That makes sense a lot. I I also would argue that the planche doesn't take into account the joint angles further up into shoulder flexion.
No,
You're only hitting this kind of horizontal resistance.
but that
Um,
was my weakness. It was getting out of
yeah.
that straddle L sit. Like I could press,
Yeah.
I could do 5 presses, I could do pike presses.
I was going to say, yeah, yeah. Okay. So your strength component in quote unquote vertical plane was far superior or far sufficient enough to do the shoulder press. Because one shoulder press is essentially you do the hard bit and then it's a straddle press to handstand.
Yeah.
So it's not like a huge strength requirement in that angle. So it makes sense. Um, who was it that helped you figure that out? Did you just stumble upon that? Or what was the process of you saying, huh, I'm doing something wrong here?
So I was working with Emmett Lewis for a long time, and he had me doing, a lot of the specific work for the Stalder very early on. I wasn't training any planche with him, and
When you say the specific work, can you tell me what the specific work is for you or was for
yeah,
you?
so it was like, the range of motion press. That was a big one he used, which was basically an eccentric straddle planche to blocks. You set up blocks past your feet, and then you try to hit that target. You go as deep into the position as possible before coming out of it.
Hmm.
And that was good, but like I couldn't get past, my feet to the hands. And even if I was to do it on slippery floor with socks,
Socks on.
yeah, I
I
still
think
didn't
I've seen
have.
so many videos of you doing that.
Yeah, dude, I still can't stall there without socks. Maybe on a really good day, and my
Hey, I've
feet aren't
seen you.
sweaty.
I've seen you for sure. With sweaty
I've
feet,
done it.
exactly. Sweaty feet, I've seen.
If it's still hardwood floor, I wipe the sweat off. I could use the calluses on my big toe to kind of help me slide a little bit. Then I could do it.
The hairy
But
toes.
yeah, there you go. But yeah, I wasn't doing any work for like I don't know my weak parts,
Hmm.
which I think was just the planche. Like my protraction was very shitty. I was
Mm.
strong. I was strong in the delts. I could do full range handstand push-ups. And
Oh,
then,
interesting.
I stopped working with Emmett Lewis because he stopped his online coaching service. Uh, he was, putting out his handstand factory stuff, his modern methods of mobility work. So then I was just doing things on my own for a bit, and then I came across this guy, Jay Mayberg. He's the guy who coaches me now. He's been coaching me for the past 3 years. His Instagram's Explore the Movement.
Mm.
He's very big on
Ex
the
CrossFit.
CrossFit. He's a
Yeah, okay.
CrossFit coach.
Yeah,
He's a high
yeah.
level CrossFit coach. But he was interested in the movement culture stuff. He worked with Ito back in the day. He was a gymnast for 16 years.
Oh, wow,
Um,
okay.
so he had a lot of the good skills. I saw him because I was on YouTube like looking up videos that like Emmett would give me exercises for hand balance, like block walks. I didn't know what that was. I would search it on YouTube. I found his video of him doing some clean block walks in the one arm handstand.
Mm.
So he had some one arms at the time, and it was like, oh, this guy's got a skill set of things that I want to achieve. So I reached out to him. I didn't know much about him, and I've stuck with him ever since. So
That's
then
cool.
it was with him, we built up, yeah, just mostly planche. We were doing some press work, but it was like after my strength training. It was like, okay, let's just use this to just, keep the skill in the background, but the main focus is going to be the planche. It's going to
Yeah,
be the flexibility work
yeah.
and just keeping the skill-based stuff kind of there, not going to
Mm.
waste, but like it wasn't the main focus. And then eventually when I got my advanced tuck planche to about 12 seconds, it was about a 12-second hold. That's around the same time I got the first Stalder press with straight
Mm. Great.
arms. Yeah.
That tracks for me. So usually I'm getting students to about 3 sets of 10 seconds in the advanced tuck, and
Oh, cool.
at that point I feel like it's a good level. So yeah, 12 seconds for a hold. That's awesome.
And
I
I
feel
think
like your advanced tuck was very advanced though.
it was good. It got to a good point. I think it was after like a year and a half of working planche. Um, but then also think about like, your other students who maybe had a better pancake than me too. Like,
Mm.
is 10 to 12 seconds, is that the point for everybody? Probably not. Like if you
No, no,
have a
no.
good pancake. For
Yeah.
me, the straddle L is just a weird position for me. I don't
Mm.
know if it's like a leverage thing, a limb length thing, because I have a better pancake than some people who could straddle L sit from the floor, like who can get into it from the floor. If I do, so some of the Australian guys, we call it the Bruce method because my
Yeah, yeah.
tortoise is named Bruce. So
Okay.
I look like a turtle, just this hunchback trying to
Mm.
get into my staller position. I go
Yeah,
into
yeah,
it from a
yeah.
squat, the rounded back squat. I can't just
I
stay on the
gotcha.
floor, lift my legs up, and get into the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
position. I don't know what it
I remember
is.
the days. You spent a bit of time in Perth, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So I lived with Harry Williams in Perth for, I don't know, 6 or 9 months back in the day, and that was when I was going really hard on the shoulder myself. And I remember the days of like crunching into the squat and then slowly walking the feet in front of you, and just these hip pains you'd get. The amount of times I would fall backwards on my ass before I'd even attempt the shoulder, it's
Yes.
painful, eh?
Yes. 100%. I'm sure being around that crew really leveled you up.
Yeah,
physically.
man, for sure. For sure. Yeah, yeah. There's a huge level of inspiration, motivation there. I gotta man, if my family wasn't in the UK, I would be living there still. Maybe not on Harry's floor, but for sure I'd be there because it's a great community. Big
Yeah,
shout out to those guys, Harry for sure.
yeah,
Um,
man.
a lot to thank them for in my kind of early practice for sure, the strength practice indeed.
I think
Um,
Australia in general, they're keeping the movement culture alive.
yeah, dude. And it's also it's in their own way. Like I've got some great connections and experiences in Europe, and people are really pushing their own version of movement practice and movement culture and generalist practice forwards.
Yep.
But I feel like Aussies have a very particular way of being as a community, integrating into kind of like quite big groups that are very dynamic, very
Mm,
competitive in a really nice way. And there's a lot of banter, there's a lot of fun, and it's just what is normal. Whereas
yep.
other countries maybe have a different culture, a different way of doing things. So there's something really fun about the Aussie culture, and it makes things that can be quite monotonous and boring quite fun and engaging.
Yeah, because think about all the early adopters of movement culture. They've all kind of found their niche elsewhere. Like I think Australia is like the main crew that's kept the hand balance, gymnastic strength, and mobility as like the core three that they're working on. Whereas maybe
Yeah.
other people have gone into more of like the parkour or martial arts side of things or just like the wavy arms. I don't even know how to describe it. Maybe the acrobatics, the floor work.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of it is to do, in my experience, I feel quite lucky. I think you've been traveling a bit as well now.
Yeah.
Like when you travel around, you get to meet some interesting people, and I really feel like the more dominant or the key teachers of an area kind of dictate the tone because they're the ones that are sharing onwards.
Yep.
And of course, like Harry Williams, he's a very specific persona. Who he is and what he's interested in is very clear for him. And
Mhm.
so that strength of character, that strength of the interest, I think really, at least in Western Australia, and I think also then it's filtered into East with his connections with Ghetto.
Mhm.
It's very clear that his strong leaning, his strong persona dictates that kind of quite clearly. Um, and I see in other cultures and other kind of movement communities, there's a different leaning. Um, for example, in Germany, I have a few good connections and a lot more. There's a lot more of a leaning towards acrobatics, for example, and this kind of
Yeah.
almost circus art practice, which is
Mm.
maybe a bit different. And I think because the key people are maybe just more interested in the art scenes. I wonder what will happen in 20 years time when it's not such an early culture. I
Mm.
listened to a podcast, well, the start of a podcast with Schwarzenegger recently, and he was talking about how many people there were in the world when he first started bodybuilding, and he said there was a couple of 100,000 people. So it was nothing in the world, and now there's. He, I don't think this is true, but he reckoned there's 4 billion people now physically training in the world. I was like, I don't know if that's true, Arnie, but I'll give it you because you're the man.
Maybe exercising.
Yeah, maybe, but also who knows? But anyway, the fact of the point is, it's hugely exponential comparative to when he started like 50 years ago. So I wonder also in this niche how that will evolve and how that will change. Um, I want to go a bit pragmatic because I get waylaid, and I wrote a question down here earlier. I said, do you have a specific mobility process? So we spoke a bit about kind of like averages of like if you hit a 12-second tuck planche, you might be strong
Mm.
enough for the Stolder. I wonder if you have like a specific set of generalized goals for people that you work with related to mobility.
Uh, Not really. Not really. I think mobility in general is task specific. So it depends first and foremost, what do you want this mobility for? Is it because you think it's going to get you out of pain? I work predominantly in the rehab space. So
Mm.
some people think they're in pain because they lack a specific range. So that's a different conversation altogether. Um, but some people want the mobility because it's going to help and make them more efficient in what they want to do. And I do think understanding where to start does come with an assessment process. Of course, you could get very simple with it. And it's like we talked about that other approach, that integrative approach where it's okay, here's your starting point. This is what you want to do. Just do this thing.
Hmm.
But I think big goals for people, at least to start, are, can you sit in a squat? Can you fold forward and, maybe palm the floor comfortably? And can you get a full 180 degrees of shoulder flexion? I think these are really good goals to tick off, especially if you're not really interested in like full splits or really deep back bends and Mexican handstands and stuff like that, things that require these extreme ranges of motion that I think for the general person, it's cool to have, but it's not always necessary to say you're a mobile person or to just move more freely in life. So I think these are the things I like to get people towards first. And then it's usually from there when they first like unlock the squat or something or a palms to floor fold, it's never enough. They're like, okay, what's next? And this was me too. Like I got into all of this just wanting to be able to sit in a deep squat and, maybe in the meantime hold a 30-second handstand, and then you reach those goals and you're like, okay, what's next? Okay, so I had surgeons tell me I wouldn't be able to squat deep unless I repaired my labrums and shaved down my bony impingements in my hip. But I was able to do that. So what's next? Can I achieve the splits? Um, Still not there yet, but hey, one day. But
Hugely improved though.
oh, 100%. And if it's like if it's improved this much, who's to say it can't improve more?
Yeah, right. And also, I think what you said earlier is really valid here. You said knowing when to give up, knowing when to stop. I think
Yes.
that's huge. I was on the process, so post Australia, obviously, the per capita one arm handstand ability, I think, is huge in Perth, maybe the best in the world in that small community. And obviously, that filtered down into me. And when I came home, I was training the one arm handstand like 5 times a week. It was insane. But I realized that I wasn't interested in it. It didn't serve who I was and what I was interested in. It was just a really fun social thing to do in that community.
Yes.
But I was so close. I was like getting 10-second balances. Okay, I'm almost able to claim it as my own, as Harry's like 10 seconds or it doesn't count and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I realized, hey, you know what? It doesn't mean enough to me to continue. So I gave up. And I think that's a really important lesson for me early on was like, it's okay to stop something before you complete/own
Yes.
the
100%.
thing.
And especially if you identify with it. Like imagine if Harry stopped hand balance. Like there would be a huge identity shift. So I think that's another important thing is like maybe not to identify with movement.
Yeah.
Or knees over toes guy. Like I'm the knees guy. Okay, what happens
Yeah.
if you blew out your knees? What are you now?
Yeah.
But man, I'm so glad you got out of the one arm because it takes up your whole life.
Yeah. I felt it. It was actually a combination of things. So it was also like COVID hit 2020. So it was this time plus like 5 days a week of like an hour and a half on my hands that was just mind numbing. So that was one of those things. You're still driving forward, right?
Yeah, I don't know when to stop. I think about that too. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm almost at a 30-second on my good side. What's gonna happen when I get that 30 seconds? Am I gonna want 40? Am I gonna want 45? Like, when is it gonna
Yeah,
be enough? But I think I've told
definitely.
myself I want to be comfortable on like all the shapes. I want a straddle, I want the straight, the baby straddle, maybe a tuck.
Mm.
And just to be able to like send it whenever, I think that would be good enough for me.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I can see that. I
the
also feel
circus,
like
yeah.
unless exactly, I was going to say unless you're moving towards performance or the circus or something of that level. Like I know David from Australia, he's now gone into like his first kind of performance, so that's really cool. Like he's obviously pushed to such a level where his not only what he can do, but what he does looks is a certain way, then it's amazing. But I think if you don't have that inclination or desire,
Yeah, then what? Go on to something else.
exactly. Yeah.
It's like, is a 45-second one-arm handstand going to serve you more than a 30-second, or maybe even just having a more consistent 20-second?
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah. Yeah.
think for me, I'm more about moving on once you feel like you're proficient enough. Like, I can't wait to the point where I'm never training flexibility again and it's just there on maintenance. I'm just really like stuck on, like, maybe it's an ego thing of like, I want to get this middle split, god damn it, just to say I
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
do it, you know? I don't think
Yeah.
it's going to
Especially with
make
your
my,
starting point.
yeah, it's just a story to tell, you know, like I was able to go from this to this. I don't think the middle split is going to make me a better mover, or I don't think it's
Or a
gonna
better
do much
person.
for me. Yeah, better. Oh, I think it will.
Oh yeah?
I think it will. I'll be a better person.
Depends who you're asking. I do think that we're maybe a subset of the population, which is like you can use the mobility of a middle split to advertise your services, which is a
Mm,
unique motivation, even if it's extrinsic, as opposed
yeah,
to Gen Pop that maybe don't have any need to advertise themselves via,
right.
middle split. So maybe there's also some emotional tie to money in the middle splits.
It could be that. It's like I'm a coach, so I got to walk the walk. You
100%.
know,
Got to split the split.
I got to split the split for sure. But I got into middle splits and stuff thinking this is gonna fix my hips. If I could do middle splits, then that means just the ability to do that means I'm probably not gonna have painful hips. I'm gonna be able to have just these buttery hips that are able to open whenever, not gonna feel pinchy. And then I actually, at many times in this journey, have made my hip pain worse training for advanced flexibility things. And I think it's been really interesting when it comes to understanding frequency and intensity and
Yeah.
how much is enough to maybe not necessarily need to speed up the process, but work at a sustainable level to where you're not flaring up old injuries. I think that's been very
Yeah.
eye-opening for me.
What's your frequency? I spoke with Joachim recently, obviously a buddy of both of us, and
Yeah.
he's under the impression right now of recoverability for him is huge. So he's on something like a 5 day cycle where he'll do one intense session every 5 days.
Yeah, I like that. Um, I think I think it's good to touch the position multiple times a week, but not train it intensely. Maybe
Yeah.
once every week, or I have even talked to people who have trained their splits once every 2 weeks and have
Yeah.
just done lighter stuff in between, and they've had good results with that. But what I personally do is one harder session, more split specific, and then another session where it's either more of an emphasis on like building the muscle associated with the flexibility position, or using less weight in the position, or more supported and just focus on building tolerance in a backed off position, or focusing on the active contraction. Like say the middle split, for example, I might have one session where I'm doing the middle split itself, maybe isometrics, eccentrics, contract relax holds. And then maybe the next session is just like a wall kettlebell middle split where I'm building the muscle associated with the middle split, getting strong there. Um, but it doesn't come with like the nervous system
Yeah.
central fatigue of like the high isometrics in this very apprehensive position.
Yeah.
Or I'm doing like a half split and focusing on like squeezing my ass as hard as I can. So it's like you're still training the position. You're just not doing the actual thing. It's kind of uh, like a West Side barbell approach of like a max effort day and like a more dynamic effort type of thing.
Yeah. 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 I think that's key. Variability, especially on the nervous system, is huge. I've really felt like when I used to do the middle split work, if I even went from 1 to 2 sessions a week, that was of an intensity that was too much to recover from, I kept getting this like hamstring ping, or like
Mm,
twinge, you know? And as soon as I went down to one or even less, I think it was in the end, my recovery was so much better, and therefore I was engaged and motivated to get into the session because it wasn't horrendous. And I think that's a real important part of I almost want to say the subjective part of mobility practice. There's some kind of emotional component, not to get too woo-woo, but I mean like the pain response, the stretch tolerance, the fear of snapping tissue, all this kind of content. How do you work with people on that level? How do you guide them through gauging intensity, gauging range of motion, allowing tissues to quote unquote relax or soften under load?
It comes with practice. So this is when we talk about frequency. I think it depends where you're at in your practice and how skillful you are at stretching. Because I think mobility, it does require frequency. It does require frequent inputs. But if you're at a position where you don't know how to get the most out of the current stretch you have, like your current range of motion potential, like you don't know how to express that just yet because you're new to flexibility work. You don't understand how to relax into a position or use tension to create more range and allow for further relaxation. I tend to prescribe some higher frequency, so maybe more on the range of 2 to 3 days a week, because they're probably not, probably don't need that recovery if they're not getting to like the very end limit of their joint and they're really taxing their connective tissues, right? So, the person who's doing isometric middle splits on sliders with a, 5 kg weight, that's going to be a different frequency than somebody who needs to understand just how to abduct their hip more efficiently and use the muscles that pull them into position, or understand how to get the adductors to relax a bit. I think that requires a little bit higher frequency under lower intensities. And we look at the movement as more practice. Like flexibility is now viewed as a skill. We're just teaching the nervous system, hey, it's okay to be in these positions, these close to end range positions. And then over time, like they develop progress, I think, relatively faster with that. And then it'll totally kind of plateau with that approach. And then you need to, up the intensity. It's like, okay, the skill component is almost maxed out. Now we need to actually build new range. And that's when the intensity comes in. And it probably requires less frequency then, because we can get more out of the drill in one session.
Yeah.
And then, I think with the sensation-based things, and like you said, how do we get somebody to not be fearful of these positions? I think it comes with the progressive overload and underload thing. Like, let's start with body weight. Let's start very backed out of intensity. Let's use external supports. Let's use yoga blocks to support the range of motion in a stretch. Let's use yoga blocks to crush, to understand how to use those muscles that need to pull you into position. I think the external feedback stuff is extremely valuable for that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this kind of constraints or task-based learning almost is really valuable, I think.
Yes.
It's almost like an extra motivation to do the thing without getting too cognitive.
Yes, I agree.
I want to ask, when it comes to your management of your training and your practice, and it comes to working with recoverability and intense strength skills, mobility projects, etc., do you have a certain rule for yourself or people that you're coaching with how many goals you have at any one time?
It depends how advanced you're getting, because I do think it is sustainable to work on it all. Like, there's a lot of things that can be very complementary to each other. Like, if you're going to have a push goal, you might as well have a pull goal as well. If you're new to leg strength training, like, yeah, you can certainly bring up your leg strength while you're, working on flexibility as well. But I just think eventually you're going to get to a point, and I think this is going to be up to the practitioner or the client to decide. And of course, the coach can help guide. But you're going to reach a point where you're plateauing in just about everything. And then it's going to be maybe up to the coach to say, like, hey, okay, you're very proficient here. I think it's worth it to give this up for the time being. It's not going to
Yeah.
go away completely. We're still going to be working some elements of this, but you have to be okay with this getting a little bit worse for now because I think you have enough resource, enough capacity in the tank to help propel you forward in other things. But I think we could put our resources into building up some of these weak points that aren't progressing as well. So for me, I think a personal example is the handstand push-up. I got to a point where like I was doing 4 to 5 reps chest to box, and I took that out completely. And I haven't trained handstand push-up for like 3 years, and then just went all in on the planche because horizontal pressing was always very weak for me.
Right.
And that because before I was trying to do both at the same time, do some handstand push-up stuff, do some planche stuff, some planche push-up work, and both were just kind of not progressing at a fast rate because there's competing
Yeah.
muscles there. They're not the same, but the delts are working, the serratus is working, the pecs. So
Yeah.
I do think it depends on how many competing uh, muscles are being worked in the program. So it just depends what is the main goal we're after, what's going to either be from the coach's perspective something more valuable for the client, or if it's from the client's perspective, if it's more valuable for them, then it's up to the coach to understand what's going to be uh, the best exercises, the best goals to work with at that time.
Mm.
And I don't think time is the factor. It's more so the competing muscles.
Yeah. And recoverability.
Yes. Like a back squat in the middle split and a dragon squat all together could be deadly. Could be deadly. Like it's a lot of adductor magnus, and that's what I was doing,
Yeah.
and it led to an adductor tendinopathy that lasted almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the process of you and your coach Jay right now? What do you do to ensure that you don't have any conflicting interests or that your goals are allowing you to recover well? Because you also have a physical job. You're not someone who's sitting at a desk all day. You're in the gym, you're working with people, you're
Yeah.
physically moving around, you're creating content for the Move Boys. It's very physical.
It is. It is. We've had the same stuff going for years now, and I think volume has probably backed off a bit because it did take a few injuries to realize what the correct dose is. And this is the thing with minimal effective dose, maximal recoverable volume, finding the fine line between those is you
Yeah,
have to you have to experience both sides of the spectrum to understand what the correct dose is. So you have to understand what doing too little is to not make gains. And then you have to understand and experience doing too much. So pushing past the point of recoverability to maybe experience a little bit of a niggle, a little bit of an injury, or to burn out physically, like not making progress. Like, yes, it's not ideal. You don't want to have to tell somebody, hey, you might have to get injured to experience this, but it does help
yeah,
with fine tuning things later on down the line. And if you are training hard, you're going to experience something down the line that gets in the way of your progress. And that
100%.
something is hopefully you're able to learn from it and find that correct dosing. So for
Yeah,
me, I think uh, we took a very high volume approach at first, and um, I think we've backed off on volume as the years have gone on, especially the adductor tendinopathy. That was a big eye-opening thing for me. Like I was always the stiff guy that never got injured. I never had a strain. I never had a lot of tendinopathies. Like, I I was always just too stiff to get these soft tissue injuries. But now I'm at a point where it's like, wow, they're happening. So like I have to be more
yeah,
um, I have to be smarter about the training and the volume and the amount of goals I'm going for. So the middle split, now that the adductors are back online, feeling good, that's kind of the main focus. Back squats there for maintenance. I do believe people should be training their legs, at least for maintenance. I don't think you should just go full in on flexibility. I do think it's important to just maintain some of the connective tissue qualities with general strength training. just keep it in the picture, you know? Like it shouldn't be the priority if flexibility is your priority, but it should be there some way, some form. So I back squat and I
What
Nordic
kind of
curl.
movements? Okay, right.
Yeah, so I back squat and Nordic curl once a week. Those are the two exercises. That's it. The rest of my flexibility work is viewed as my accessories, if you will.
Do you do anything more dynamic, like plyometrics, jumping, anything more for the legs, or?
Yeah. There's been phases where we've incorporated some more plyometrics in the mix, but there was a long period of time where I had to take it out because jumping hurt the groin, you know, a lot of specific stuff. So that was more on the velocity side of the spectrum had to be taken out. But I do find benefit a lot in the jumping, you know, especially if that's a weakness for you.
Yeah.
And it's less compressive, you know, than heavy weight. So I think it could be complementary for a flexibility practice if you wanted to include some jumping in there just for
Right.
maintenance or yeah. I think that stuff should be in there some way, some
Awesome.
form. It doesn't have to be year round, but just, you know, phase it in.
I agree. I'm fully aware we're coming up on time, and I want to get a couple of more things in, so I'm
Yeah,
going to try
sure.
my best to keep it brief. Um, the first one may be more of a clickbait question, but I'll let you choose the topic. So either hip mobility or shoulder mobility. Both of those I think are hot topics. I want 3 tips for people trying to improve either hip mobility or shoulder mobility.
Very clickbaity. Um, I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. They're a very similar joint. They're not the exact same. Um, 3 tips for improving hip mobility. Okay. And you know what? I'm going to cover both shoulder and hip
Okay,
because
amazing.
I have a similar rule. I think most people should move well in the sagittal plane before looking at transverse and frontal plane. So can you flex and extend? Can you flex the shoulder? Can you extend the shoulder? Can you flex the hip? Can you extend the hip? Because I think that's going to offer more variability if you can achieve these first. And specifically flexion. In my workshops I teach, I it's a big emphasis on improving flexion. So shoulder flexion um, and hip flexion because there's more, it's a loose pack position in the joint, meaning there's more degrees of freedom. The ligaments aren't as taut in these positions, and some of the rotational aspects are actually quite similar in end range flexion than they would be with rotation. So, for instance, shoulder flexion. If you want to achieve a full 180 degrees of shoulder flexion, you know, the scapula has to do specific things and the humerus has to be able to rotate in specific ways. And I think if you're having a lot of trouble just working through your rotation, your hip rotation or your shoulder rotation, and it's not going anywhere, maybe it's because you don't actually move well in the sagittal plane. So I think people, you know, rotational mobility work is very popular in the mobility space. Like, oh, you have hip issues. You're not training your hip internal rotation or your shoulder internal rotation. That's good to work on for some people who move decently elsewhere, but they just have a transverse plane as a limitation. But I think people jump to that way too fast, and then it leads people to say like, oh, I've done the sleeper stretch for years and nothing has gotten better. Whereas like they flex their shoulder to here and they have tight lats, they have tight pecs, like the superficial stuff is restricting the joint from actually moving. So I think moving linearly helps. And it's going to make, you know, the associated segments like the pelvis and the scapula, it's going to make sure those interactions aren't getting in the way of the femur or humerus moving more efficiently. So I go backwards. I know FRC's model was like rotation first, then look elsewhere. I'm okay. Can we flex and extend? Well, great. Now, can we move through the frontal plane? Well, can we adduct and abduct the hip? Can we horizontally adduct the shoulder, get length through the backside of the shoulder? Can we abduct the shoulder? And then, okay, now let's look at the transverse plane. Like I'm a firm believer you don't don't go after the very deepest layer of the joint unless you have to. See what you can get out of the muscles first. So I don't know, that you asked for 3 things. I think that's a couple of them, but let's see, another one. I think it's helpful. It's not needed, but have some sort of practice that allows you to express the ranges of motion, and it gives you incentive for training the boring things, because you see it all the time. If mobility doesn't come easy for you, then it's going to take time to make these long-term adaptations. So it requires that you're invested in the training. And what's going to keep you invested is, I guess, having a reason outside of this, like you said, the boring work. So whether it doesn't have to be hand balance, but like, okay, if you're training your straddle handstand and a wider straddle makes you more efficient in like a one-arm handstand or something, or a press to handstand, then maybe that's going to be the thing that gives you the incentive to train your middle split. Or whether it's martial arts or climbing, something to just have as a means of fun to help keep that mobility practice alive. And then the
Or to
third
enjoy the merits of your hard work as well. Like when you do get the gains, use them, enjoy them,
Yep.
maybe, which makes sense.
Yeah, and it's funny when it's not always mobility that has that transfer. Like I actually am a great example, because I was never mobile, and I was able to achieve a lot of the things that require a lot of mobility for. I think it goes to show you that you could do so much with what you have before trying to expand your range of motion. So I think that's another tip. Like, get good at using the amount of range of motion you have currently before trying to expand that range of motion. And I think people with pain and joint limitations, I think those are people who aren't good at using what they currently have. So they might come to me and say like, oh, my shoulder's in pain, and I also lack this range of motion, I lack this range of motion. But a lot of people with, impingement-like symptoms, they overuse certain aspects of their range, and they don't have a lot of, variability in their movement habits. So just giving them a bit more options in how to use what they have is key. So I think trying to build flexibility and mobility on a foundation of a system that doesn't know how to use what they currently have well, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. And I don't think it's going to allow the nervous system to feel comfortable gaining more range and expanding more range.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that's a mic drop comment right there.
Use what you got, bitches.
Let's go. Exactly. GMoney, Garrett, thank you so much for engaging with me and for putting up with me. That was awesome. Where can everyone find your work? You're also working online, right?
Yeah. So GMoney Movement, GMoney MVMT. You can find me on Instagram and YouTube. I'm doing more longer form content on YouTube, which is it's a bit more enjoyable for me in the educational side of things. And then my website.
And it's great. I've been watching it. It's really good.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. And then gmoneymovement.com. You can find my offerings on the website, whether it's online coaching or programs and whatnot.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much.